Right, let's go. And I will. Good evening and welcome to UK Crime Book Club. And I'm delighted this evening to be joined by Rachel Donohue, and her book, The Glass House, is out now. Let me get my fingers off of your... You've probably got a nice shiny proof. This is a proof, I think. So, so thank you, Rachel, for joining us. I thought we'd start by just introducing yourself and your book.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. Yes, my name is Rachel Donohue, and The Glass House is my third novel. In terms of, we were just talking in terms of trying to describe, I suppose I'm in the kind of mystery space, crime, mystery, and a bit of intrigue always. I think certainly when I'm writing, I very much try to create a universe in my novels. So I've tried to do that with this book. My first novel was published about 4.5, 5 years ago, and my second a year or two after that. And then, as I said, this is my third, The Glass House.
Yeah, so I mean, we were talking just before about the group and how sort of widespread the interests of the readers and the authors are, and we were saying that the Glass House sort of is quite an interesting sort of story. Did you want to just say a little bit about the sort of the blurb?
Sure, absolutely. Well, basically, it takes place in really, I suppose, two halves. It's set in 1963 in Ireland, and then it flips between 1963 and 1999. And the central characters are two sisters called Stella and Aisling, who's live in Galway on the west coast of Ireland, and with their kind of strange philosopher father who has quite, I suppose, dark sympathies towards eugenics and Nazism, and there's a sort of question mark over his behavior prior to the war. He's sort of escaped and come to live in the west of Ireland, and the sisters are, I suppose, growing up with a sort of vague awareness. There's a lot of parties, there's a lot of guests, there's a lot of post-war European people coming to stay with them. They're never quite sure who they are. And then he dies just sort of on the verge of major fame when he writes a philosophical book that becomes very, very popular. He dies in quite mysterious circumstances in Galway. And then I suppose we're flipping between what happened to him, and 30 years later, his remains are essentially dug up in a small country churchyard in Galway, and his daughters have to come back to the house, and there's a sort of narrative, parallel narrative around what we learn and what happens. So it flips between the two. It's set, as I say, in Galway. In Dublin, one of the characters goes to Trinity, Aisling, and then there's also parts in London and Florence as well. So, so I suppose it's quite an involving mystery. I think my books are quite character driven.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of really explore, what would it be like to grow up with an infamous parent, and how would you sort of handle that?
Was that your sort of inspiration, really? That sort of for
the book? And then I had a very direct inspiration, funnily enough. I was reading I've signed up to like a history newsletter that I love, and a couple of years ago I read an article about how Oswald Mosley moved to Galway in the 1950s with his wife, and lived very, very quiet, sort of respectable life for a couple of years in the west of Ireland. And that is just not something that I had ever heard of, or is particularly well known. And he was quite sort of, known around the neighborhood, and it was just no drama particularly about it. And that really got me thinking. I was like, my gosh, like, what would happen if somebody did come and stay? Who would they be? I think he lived there for about 2 years. I think the house burnt down and he moved to Cork and then he left. But just very strange. And I've always been kind of interested in the whole, what happened to people after the war, people who had, sympathies and ideas. And then I suppose just even the current environment in terms of looking at some things that are coming back, maybe some sort of ideas about who has a value, who doesn't, and various different things. It just, that notion of stuff coming back and never being finished. And just at the beginning of the book, I had in the epigraph section, I love William Faulkner, and my quote is, maybe nothing ever happens once and is finished. And I think that's
Must.
something, that sort of circular motion of things was,
Yeah.
so a lot of different ideas. I mean, you know yourself, I'm sure, with any of your writers there, you know, inspiration comes in, it really isn't linear. You know, you read something or then you feel something, and place is very important to me. So in this book, our philosopher and his daughters live in a very modernist house in the west of Ireland. And in my first novel, The Temple House Vanishing, it was a kind of Catholic boarding school on the coast. And then in my second book, The Beauty of Impossible Things, was a seaside, a kind of rackety seaside town, you know. So place is very important along with character. And I really kind of work from that.
Because that was one thing I was going to say to you about, was that the characters are really, you know, sort of fundamental to the story, as is the setting. I think the setting is, you know, the big house and the sort of the, you know, that sort of, and also like Trinity, and like you said, there's lots of that I really enjoyed sort of because as I said before, I hadn't been to Ireland, but I obviously know of Trinity, and but actually it sort of felt like I was sort of getting to know those places as well as the characters, and I thought that was, they say write what you know. So is that why you set your books in Ireland? Because obviously you know Ireland, and that's, or just because that's how it feels, right?
Yeah, I think it's a combination, I suppose. Yeah, I like to read books where I'm taken away to other places, you know. So I would love, like I said, whether it's reading something in the deep south in America, or whether it's in Russia, or a stately home in like Scotland, or a castle or something. I like to be taken away by a writer. You know, I don't really want to see my daily life so much. I want to be brought somewhere maybe new. So I suppose when I'm trying to write, I just want to feel somebody. You know, my books have been on sale in Australia and New Zealand and the UK and in the US. So I really feel I want to create for that reader who might be far away and has never been, you know, to Dublin or to Galway, to kind of get a sense of that feeling. I think weather as well plays a big part. You know, my first novel was very much an autumn novel, The Temple House Vanishing. It's the dying of the year, the darkness that comes, all of that. My second novel was very much a heat wave summer, hot summer. And then this is set in a kind of the wintry winter of sort of 1963, you know, a very cold winter, 1962-63. So trying to capture that sense of sort of the icy Dublin streets, the square, Fitzwilliam Square, Trinity, the cobblestones. So I didn't do a huge amount of research, funnily enough, because I've always felt I don't want to be, like, I've never written anything set in the past so much before. So I didn't do too much reading, but I love looking at photographs, you know, finding old photos of Dublin, what the pubs looked like, what people were wearing, you know. And then I read an excellent book, Remembering How We Stood, by a chap called John Ryan, who was a publican. If anyone has been to Dublin, he owned Davy Byrne's pub and had a lot of literary, you know, was good friends with Kavanagh and Behan and lots of different people. And he wrote a beautiful memoir about Dublin in the kind of 50s. So I read that to kind of just get a sense of the, you know, just the light in the city, you know, and the kind of smell of the city. He spoke about it smelling like peat smoke, you know, it's kind of, so to try and get things like that. But mostly it was photos, talking to my dad, who was around that time, obviously, and just kind of getting him, so where was the cool place to go for coffee, you know, that kind of stuff. But in general, it's all in my head, you know, I just make it up.
Well, no, I mean, and I think that sort of sense of place and being able to transport your reader. I mean, I was certainly transported. And I think also, we'll come back to it in a second, but like the two timelines of having, you know, that sort of, I mean, they're both sort of set around the house and in the same place, but very different times. So that must have been, you know, a challenge as well. Let's talk about the characters. So we've got I'll probably say it wrong. Is it
Aisling?
Aisling.
Yeah, so like ASH if you were Irish.
Oh, my daughter's called Aoife, so I know about how to pronounce how to pronounce Irish names, but I didn't know this one. And Stella, so they're two sisters, and they live in their house. They live in the house with Richard, their sort of
father.
Quite unlikable father, I would say. I think that's
narcissistic, strange, center of the universe.
How was sort of when you were writing those, so how did the characters sort of come about, and particularly him, because he is, like you said about Mosley, but like just the depth of his like unlikability without giving too much of the story away.
No, I just wanted that sense of dominance. I often think with these sort of the men who are quite, this is a vast generalization, but that the sort of the big man, the big
Yeah,
kind of strong man sort of notion, and what that would be like, to live with, and particularly
yeah,
as kind of daughters, motherless daughters. And I think the sort of narcissism, I think I kind of worked from that. I was like, this person thinks they're the center of the universe. They've got a very strong sense of their vision of what's the future is going to look like and what they should be doing and how we should all be behaving. So, I kind of worked back from that.
yeah.
I'm not a great planner with novels, Karen. Like I do sort of, I get the sense
Okay.
of, yeah, I get the kind of sense of place, and then I sort of feel somebody's voice. And it started with Ashling's voice. And I kind of had the image of her. It starts at the book of her sort of staring out the window as the glamorous guests arrive from Europe.
Yeah,
And I kind of went from there. So it's very much, they tell me, like, I sit down every day and I don't really know what's going to
interesting.
happen.
Yeah,
I sometimes have a sense of the end, but I don't really know where we're going along the way. So they kind of reveal themselves. And I know that sounds a bit weird, but and I'm sure some of your um, writers and readers will understand, but they do kind of emerge,
yeah.
from the
No, I think
shadows a
that's.
bit.
I think others have
Yeah.
said that as well, and
Mm,
I always find it fascinating because I haven't written a book, so I always find it fascinating that you can have an idea and that idea becomes a fully formed
mm.
person or place or both.
Yeah, yeah, to try and understand people sort of from first they're on the outside, and then you have to try and sort of understand from the inside. I know
Yeah,
Stephen King has that famous kind of description of as the author, you kind of light the campfire, in the edge of the woods, sort of, at midnight, and then by 6 in the morning, like there's a few people have emerged, and have come out of the woods and are now sitting with you, and it is a little bit like, you're not,
yeah,
I never know exactly, and a voice and place are definitely very strong, and the rest is just trying to imagine. And and again, this is why, to anybody who's starting out, why reading is so important with you just can't write if you're not reading, if you
no,
haven't spent. And I came to writing later in life. I had written a lot as a teenager, and then I just put it away, and then literally just read, and then when my second child was born, I just suddenly sat down and was like, I need to write. I need to write. It just suddenly
mm,
came out again, like 15, 20 years after I'd stopped, and it was something I had to kind of do. It just
yeah,
kind of emerged. So reading is, for anyone who's starting out, I think reading is everything really. Writing is secondary, because it's so inspiring. And to hear, as I said to you, I loved Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose. I don't know if
yeah,
anyone has read that, but again, it's just so magical. And I love the mixing of kind of crime, mystery, philosophy, religion. There's a lot of different stuff. Like my first book was very much against the backdrop of the end of the sort of strength of the Catholic Church in Ireland. It's set in
yeah,
a boarding school, and a girl goes missing from the school. And but again, it was sort of just that mix of kind of the ritual of religion and the ritual of all of that stuff really adds to it. And again, it's by reading and that you kind of you just
yeah.
get these ideas, and suddenly something emerges, so it's so important.
I think it's I think with the characters, as you said, they develop through the process, and the
Mhm.
sort of the characters, if we go back to sort of the sisters, I was really fascinated with their sort of dynamic because
Mm,
their mothers died
yes,
when they're
when they're
young,
very
wasn't
little.
she? And they don't really, they sort of, they've been told what the truth is, but I don't think it's a huge spoiler to say that as
Mm,
they find out something different. I think that's
mm,
fair
absolutely,
enough.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they have a very sort of, I was sort of almost like, there's almost, I said to you before at the beginning, like, that sort of gave me this sort of secret history sort of
Hmm.
feels, but also there's that Great Gatsby sort of big,
The
big little
parties.
girls in a big house with the
Mm,
parties, and
mm,
just, yeah, I think there's so many aspects of the book that I found really interesting, and I liked how the process of the sisters, how I'm one of three sisters, so
hmm.
I always like sister dynamics in books.
Yes, yeah. And funny, I read just out of I didn't think about it recently. Only recently I was like, gosh, that's quite interesting. I had been reading quite a good book, The Fabulous Bouvier Sisters, about Jackie O and her sister.
Okay, yeah,
Which is, I mean, and it's in no way based on them, but it just that element of kind of sort of glamorous sisters who are quite different, and what
yeah,
that dynamic. And Stella certainly becomes a kind of it girl a little bit around
yeah,
London, kind of like a
yeah,
sort of party girl in the 60s, while her sister is more just sort of retreats from the world a bit. And it's, but I think I was trying to, trying to deal with some sensitive topics in a way that felt, real. And, I think their love, and I think that's, even though it's quite a dark book at times, I do think kind of love nearly wins out or almost wins out in it, whether it's the love of
yeah,
sisters or, the people around it. There is, because it's dark, I felt I had to find love in it,
yeah.
you
I think
know.
there is the darkness, but I think, like you said, there is definitely sort of light and hope in it as well. So
Yeah, and sort
yeah,
of loyalty and, things that can bring people together and they can find themselves again, whether it's two sisters or two lovers or whatever, that there's
yeah,
something to fight the darkness. So I was hoping that that would come through in their relationship as well.
yeah. I
Mm.
think did you sort of what was the sort of the challenge, what were the challenges of writing a book with two timelines? Because obviously we've got the 1963 and then we've got 1996 1999, sorry,
99, yeah.
99. And so did you sort of write them sort of together? Did you write them separately and then sort of mesh them together?
Yeah, I wrote them together. It is a challenge, and particularly because in the modern time frame, the person narrating doesn't know enough. So you've got all these limits and you're like, oh, you want to tell
Yeah,
more. And then also characters looking back kind of change their perspective a bit, so you kind
yeah,
of have to watch that. But I certainly, in the modern section, I wanted it to feel very different. I wanted it to have a sense of, the figure of authority, sort of the detective who starts to kind of get a little
yeah,
bit involved and try to understand. I wanted him to seem quite powerless against these really big, dark ideas that bubble under and take over, whether it's a family or a society or whatever, that at times people are very powerless, who
yeah,
supposedly have power because they just don't have, it's like a failure to imagine what darkness could be, how people might view other humans or how they might want to treat other people. And that if you're a relatively good person, you just don't even imagine it really, you don't
no,
imagine. That's why he's so shocked that in his local churchyard there's, a desecrated grave, there's these symbols of, darkness, and he's just like how can this be? So I wanted him to be a bit not useless but kind of helpless. So
yeah,
that's quite different. While the part set in 1963 and moving through that section is very propulsive. You know exactly, because these characters are in control, but
yeah.
my detective, really isn't in control. He doesn't really solve anything. He's just our eyes to try and understand what's going on.
And that's quite interesting as well, isn't it? Because he's doing it from sort of a cold case, really, sort
Mm.
of he's almost like he's investigating a modern crime, but then, sort of like you say, he has to
Opening
delve
something
into
up.
the past
Yeah.
to get to the truth of sort of, or not get to the truth, or uncover
Mm.
why this has happened. And I found it really interesting, like you said, about having that the father, the parent who's sort of notorious or
Mm-hmm.
famous,
Infamous.
or
Yeah.
um that actually that your sort of view of them is very different to the outside view. And I think we see that in the modern
Mm.
day of the book, don't we, as people are like almost looking at him, some people looking at him almost like a sort of an idol figure, which I
Yes.
imagine, even there's still people like that, isn't there, that people think people are good and that they're not good, and
Yes.
people who are bad, and so it's that
Yes.
sort of perspective, isn't it, as well, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and sort of the things you can never know. I think that's,
Yeah,
it's sort of the public reputation, and then, you know, the stuff you just don't know in the background, and who somebody really is, even though you love their books or their philosophy or their whatever, that you don't really know. And and then how protective people are of a reputation, as we've seen so many times,
Yeah.
they can't quite imagine or can't quite accept that maybe that wasn't fully the way it
Yeah.
was. So yeah, so I mean, this makes it sound very worthy or whatever. I mean, it is there is a riddle to be solved in the story. It is, but it is definitely character driven, and I think it's quite involving. That's what I was hoping to do, because that's what I only write the things I might try and read, which is just
Yeah.
like really immerse me on an afternoon in another place and bring me these
Yeah.
strange people and let me see what happens to them, so
Yeah,
yeah.
I definitely felt that with the two timelines as well, is that you sort of get to the, you're sort of reading, you'll be reading like the sort of the 60s part, and then
Mhm.
you'll skip, and I'm like, no, I don't want to do that now. I want to carry on with that bit, because
Leave me.
and then but then you get into that bit and you're like, oh, okay, so what's going to happen there? So yeah, so that sort of, it didn't feel, I just wanted to carry on reading, because it is a really engrossing book, and it's not, as you said, it's not what I would say is, it's not traditional crime, and is it that you've got a who done it. I think I read somewhere that you said it was a why done it, which I loved.
Yes, I think that's what I do in all of them. Like, I just, I think I'm always about the why.
Yeah.
Why would somebody end up in this situation? How would it lead to this? Where might it,
Yeah.
I think that's probably it. And also the writing's really, I started writing short stories and I still write short stories. So I have a kind of sparseness, I think, as well, in my writing. Maybe that's, so I like to kind of, yeah, I mean, I like to kind of do really good writing. I'm trying to really write well for, like, I feel
Yeah.
like if you're going to pay money for a book, it should be like really well written. And like, that's what takes me time, to try and really give the best that I can give. And it's never good enough and it's never whatever, but you do your best, to kind of make the language beautiful, as
Yeah.
well as tell a good story. So that's where I kind of think they're definitely mysteries, but I'm hoping that they're, you know, um, that if you don't necessarily always read a mystery, that you might read this and enjoy it too,
Yeah,
Mm.
I think, yeah, there's a lot of depth to it, isn't there? Because of because of the topic, and because of I think the characters are very complex, aren't they? There's a lot of depth in all of the characters, and I think that's always really exciting in a book, no matter what genre it is, because
Yes,
most
totally.
people want to find out about people, don't they? They like the psychology behind.
And be curious about people,
Yeah,
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 really, really curious as to how somebody might end up like that, or
yeah,
saying, or who might that person be. So I think that's, I mean, if you felt that, that's great, because that's really because I feel a bit haunted by my characters for about a good 6 months to a year after. They kind of haunt me a bit,
yeah.
until I'm able to then leave them, because they do become quite real. In my head.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And I can imagine in characters as well, when, there is darkness in the book.
Mm.
That darkness does sort of, have to sort of, you have to write that darkness, don't you? So I can
Mm.
imagine that it definitely could weigh on you as well. But
Yes.
obviously, maybe
Yeah.
it's cathartic as well to get it, to
Yeah, no, and it definitely, this book was, they're all quite dark, but this one was definitely darker. And yeah, it had a heaviness as I was doing it, which took a while
Mhm.
to kind of push beyond. Yeah.
Was that different? So you said about your other books as well. So was it like, because they always say the notorious second book, how was your sort of process of becoming published? Was it an easy thing to do? You said you wrote and then
Yeah,
you
well,
came
yeah,
back
as I
to it.
said, came to it late, and then I started entering short story competitions because I really didn't have any connections with writers or didn't know anyone in publishing or anything. So
Yeah.
I, part discipline and also part to try and kind of just see how I compare to the people I enter competitions. And it's hilarious. I'm like totally not a competitive person on any level. But for some reason, I was like, no, I'm going to enter my story. So it's like just weird. But anyway, I sent one off, the first one of the early ones, and I got a lovely note back from Penguin Ireland, actually, had been on the judging panel, and they, whoever, I didn't win or anything, but I got a lovely note from somebody in there saying, I think you should keep going. I think you might have the voice, that everybody talks about. You might have
Oh, wow.
or have a chance. So it was lovely feedback, and it's so just for anybody who is judging people's work, or it's so the right feedback can be so helpful, and the wrong feedback could be just so whatever. So anyway, I kept going then, and I eventually won in Ireland we had a competition, the Hennessy New Irish Writer of the Year. So it was quite a big competition. You'd be published in the equivalent of the Times, in England.
Oh wow, yeah.
Times, yeah. And so I won that in 2017, and out of that I got contacted by an agent in London who said, are you represented, and all the rest of it. And then out of that then I got the publishing deal, so which was super. So yeah, no, very important, and just really good to do, to put yourself out there, to kind of get used to seeing how you get on. Do you get published, do you not? And there's a very healthy scene in Ireland in terms of like literary journals, and people are very open to your stories and things. So it's very democratic. There's a real chance that you can send something in and it might get noticed. So it's great, really good.
Do you have do you have a lot of literary festivals in Ireland?
So many. You have to come over, Karen.
Yeah, I know.
You need to come. Your summer could be very busy. No, there's lots of them, big and small, with some great names, both UK, international, Irish. Funny enough, my books were kind of published into the pandemic, both of them, and then at the end of the pandemic. So I haven't had a huge experience of festivals. I got to go one lovely one in West Cork, which I highly would recommend, but I haven't seen many of the others because I didn't. I wasn't on. They weren't running those years. But there's loads of them. So all over the country, from Galway to Dublin to West Cork. Carlow has a great festival as well. So there's loads, yeah. And all different, like there's crime ones, or there's more general, so every kind of type, yeah.
Do you like sort of doing the events? So is that something that you enjoy doing as a sort of as a writer? Because I know everybody doesn't. I know that it's not some people like writing and then that's it. They want to, but some people enjoy the other side.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience because things just weren't kind of on, or
no,
they
I
weren't
guess that's
coming back. So I don't know really is what I would say. I mean, I think like a lot of writers, would be pretty introverted. So I'm not sure, but I mean, I think it would be lovely to get out and meet readers, and that's nice. And this week I've been in a lot of bookshops and stuff, and it's lovely to meet the booksellers, because again, it's just great to have that experience and talk to them about the book, and they ask really great questions, and so if I can get to a festival, it'd be great.
Yeah, no, it'd be brilliant. Yeah, no, it would be really good. What are you working on at the moment?
Yeah, I've just finished writing. I tend to, when I finish a book, I like to write a short story, and the short stories can take you ages. So I've kind of been working on a ghost story, kind of post-pandemic ghost story.
Oh, wow.
I'm always trying to write the perfect ghost story, and I have succeeded. But so I was working on that, and I do have another idea that I'm sort of starting to get into, but it's early days. So as I said, I need a kind of mourning period for a while after a book. I just need I need them to leave. And then I find short fiction is a great way to get back writing without the pressure of, I'm on my, my big magnum opus or whatever. It's nice to kind of do short fiction. It's a very good discipline for writing. You really have to get yourself together on it. So yeah, but yeah, someday I'll have a ghost story for you.
I think that's sort of, I haven't read your first. I'm really interested in the Temple Vanishing, because that sounds like
Vanishing.
that sounds like really interesting. So because I love books set in schools, that sort of dark academia sort of sort of thing.
I was really going for that kind of Picnic at Hanging Rock, meets whatever, so I wanted to write a classic boarding school, because I love them too. I've always loved school stories, and Secret History obviously as well, and others. So Prime and Miss G. Brodie. So yeah, and it's quite gothic. I mean, that was something funny after my first, I think with all the books, people talk about a bit of a gothic, and obviously Ireland has a big kind of gothic tradition. I hadn't really thought that that's what I was doing, but it's then when when other people tell you, and I'm like, oh gosh, there is a lot. And even in this now, the digging up in the graveyard, and it's quite gothic-y. And as I said, there is quite a big tradition of that. So I think I'm part of that a bit as well, that there might be, in addition to the kind of mystery, there's a gothic element to my writing,
Yeah, and I do like a gothic sort of influence, and I think it's I think you need darkness, don't you, for that? You know, you need an element of darkness
and
you
drama.
need, yeah, sort of.
Yeah.
And
I
also
love the
historic
Bronte.
as well, I think, isn't
Yeah.
it? Generally, I mean, I guess they're probably, I don't know. I'm thinking probably that historic is, more sort of lends itself more, doesn't it, to that sort of.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But I think you can. I mean, I do love the kind of, like, definitely the Temple House Vanishing was set in the 90s. So
Yeah,
kind of
like
modern
historic now.
Gothic. Yeah. Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. Now it is. Yeah. So I do love when people make a modern setting
Yeah,
spooky.
yeah.
I do love people who can do that well, and it's something. Even in this glass house, the modernist house, which is all glass and steel, I wanted it to feel. It's not the traditional spooky house, but it's a kind of a
No,
version of an Art Deco spooky house. You know, it's kind of cold, and they talk about it being hollow. You know, polished sort of stillness and hollow. You know that there's something not quite right in it.
I also think, that's to do with as well, isn't it? And in this book as well, that's to do with the sort of the people who are in it as well. I think there's that darkness where the mum's always sort of looking, there's the picture of the mum on the wall, painting on the wall, and she's always sort of like looking, and as we said, like they find out more about their mum. And I thought it was really interesting as well, was the sort of the dad has really sort of taken them away from the rest of their family, hasn't he? So the mother's family, that they've sort of, he doesn't like them. I mean,
No.
or they don't like him.
Yeah. Yeah. Their mother's Irish, but she's dead when they're very young, as you said, and she is sort of a painting on the wall now, but her family's in Ireland. But yeah, he doesn't really want them near them. And they're always, again, quite curious about that sort of half. Are they, are they not? And that sense of sort of, they talk a little bit about settling on the land, but never quite getting under the skin of it, and I think they feel a little bit like that, like the eternal outsider.
Yeah. I think
not quite fitting.
Like you said, and even though it's their house, it doesn't feel homely, does it? They've got Siobhan, haven't they?
The housekeeper who they love, yes.
Yeah, who's like almost like a mother substitute, isn't she, for them, really?
Yes.
But yeah, I really liked her as part.
She was an important character, because at first she sort of disappeared after a while, and then I was like, she actually has to come back when they're grown older. I need her to be there, because again, just on that balancing with light and sort of love and that some warmth, because the home is so cold. It's cold place.
Yeah, she does. She definitely does. Like you say, bring a little bit of warmth into their sort of cold, the coldness of their life. And I sort of felt for when Aisling goes off to university and Stella's sort of left behind. That's that sort of like really sort of struck me as, oh God, she's there in that big house all on her own.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it was, in that first kind of section of the book, when it ends with her leaving for university, you really do feel, oh no, because again, you just wanted to kind of establish their relationship and the dynamic and their need for each other, and that being kind of broken, because Aisling's choosing freedom to try and get away if she can, and to get to college and university in Dublin.
I was sort of interested with them, because Stella sort of seems like the more fragile of the two, doesn't she? But then as I got through the book, I wasn't so sure about that. I thought that it does sort of, I think that, I guess they just deal with things differently, don't they?
Yes, they're very different. And at the beginning, they're referred to as like day and night,
Yeah, he does, doesn't he, when he's describing them?
One's dark, one's fair. They're, very different. Aisling feels Stella's the favorite, but also Stella's always getting into trouble because she doesn't quite read her father's moods right, and she'll blunder in, while Aisling's more watchful and she knows what's going on. But I think you're right. I think their strength, that it ebbs and flows, and I think towards the end you've a lot of, I hope, respect kind of for Stella at the end. Having her path being a little bit different. Yeah.
Because I think, like you say, so she does escape, and
they both do.
They both do, don't they? Because of what happens, which we can't talk about. So.
No, and it's funny. I've had a lot of, again, like, you just never know until you put the book out there. But I've had some lovely just reader kind of feedback, and they all nearly to a T are saying, oh, it's a book about freedom.
Yeah.
The book about freedom. And like, I certainly wouldn't have set out to write a book about freedom, you know,
No,
but
no, that's really true, actually.
kind of
Yeah.
emerges obviously for people who are reading it or sensing that. So I was like, gosh, you know, you learn so much. Like the process of the book is not finished until other people read it.
Yeah.
It really isn't, you know.
Is that difficult sometimes? Have you, if you're, you know, you know, there's always, even it doesn't matter how well received they are, sometimes you'll always get like a negative, but have you sort of felt generally as well that you've sort of been really happy with that sort of?
Yeah, I think people have been very kind generally. I mean, obviously not everybody's going to love, and you can't think about that when you're writing.
No, you
Like,
have to do
all
what you
I
want
can
to
think
do.
about is doing the absolute best that I can.
Yeah.
But you just can't think about it, how people are, because if you do, you will police your
Yeah.
creativity.
And you
But
sort
I
of,
think in general, I think that people are very, you know, fair and open, and you know, it's like, and obviously you're just not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and
no.
that's fine. You
But
know,
I mean,
that's absolutely
there's
fine.
so many books, you don't need to be everybody's cup of tea.
No, exactly. And I think people who do love it really love it.
Yeah. Okay, you go.
Excuse me.
That's okay. Just let Rachel get herself a drink.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. You okay?
Just about sorry.
We don't want anybody choking live on TV.
No.
It's like,
Excuse me.
are you all right? Do you need in a minute?
No, I'm fine.
It's horrible coughs when they take you like that.
I thought I was over it, but it's coming back. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's when you, I think probably if you're talking quite a lot, sometimes it can.
Excuse me. Yeah.
So who sort of inspired your writing over the years?
I love the Brontes.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I did wonder actually because of the.
Excuse me.
Sorry, I did wonder because of the dark. You know, I think yeah.
Yeah. I love Donna Tartt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both sort of like, I can definitely see that sort of gothic, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And dark.
Dark gothic sort of, yeah, characters, you know, very, yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'll wait for you to be ready.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, very wide reading.
Yeah.
You know, I love Barbara Vine.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she's yeah.
Yeah. Patricia Highsmith as well.
Yeah. So you've definitely got that sort of, yeah, I can see both of that, you know, the inspiration of the gothic and the sort of mystery there.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I just think read as widely as possible. Like I was saying, you know, just to really get as much experience as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think when the words become more important, don't they? As a writer, you want to be able to read.
Yeah.
You want to be able to put out what, you know, like you said, the most, you know, the most sort of interesting, most, you know, the depth of, and get over what you want.
Yeah, exactly. And I think definitely the Brontes would be big favorites and would have always, you know, just for the whole sort of passion and drama and again the setting and just that whole experience when you read it.
Yeah, well, you get sort of a taste of their lives, don't you, of what they went through,
the harshness, the bleakness.
Yeah, the harshness of, although probably to them it wasn't, you know, it was just how it was.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. No, I think it's yeah, I do love Barbara Vine. I must say, I do find she's just so clever, and the same with Highsmith. There's such a cleverness in their writing. which you kind of, sometimes you don't see it that often, just this real sense of smart intelligence. Same with Donald. So I really admire that when you come across it. It's just, and then they have everything else, the good story, the real intelligence at the base of it. That's just so admirable. But
it's interesting, isn't it, how you sort of do get inspired, I mean, because I started reading the Brontes when I was really young. Jane Eyre is my favorite.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, it's dark. I mean, I like darkness. I think lots of people do, whether it's crime or mystery or psychological thriller or anything like that. That darkness does. People like to read that darkness.
Yes.
So
and again, great characters. The things that stay with you are, whether it's Rochester or there's just
And I think when I read it to begin with,
excuse me,
I read it quite superficially, probably as a teen.
I'm sorry, Caramel.
That's all right. Do you want to finish? Yeah. No, it's fine. That's okay. We're going to let Rachel go because she's struggling. But thank you for joining us.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And The Glass House is out now from all good bookshops, and I'll share the link in the chat. I hope you can get some respite from your cough.
Thank you so much.
That's okay. I'll send your publicist a link as well. So take care.
Take care, Karen.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye.